Hey there, it's Matt. Welcome to another vlog, or perhaps I go into my ambiguous or my terrible and disheartening crisis, or perhaps I actually try to speak more optimistically, which can be difficult sometimes, but I'll say this, there's always something to look forward to. It can be as simple as waking up in the morning and eating breakfast, or it can be as considerable as something more interesting, such as creating and finalizing a musical project, or perhaps even seeing someone I love that I haven't seen in a while, in a long time. But really, I think I'd have to wonder how it is that I feel. I've noticed that my disorder is not really hurting me like a disorder could hurt someone. Of course, it's always dependent on what it is that you're dealing with. But I feel like I'm doing great enough. I just found one of my gloves and then the other one. Okay, shouts out to that right here. So I dropped them at some point. I knew I had. So I'm glad those are there. It reminds me of an event, or not an event, but just a moment that happened to me where I saw a pair of headphones on the ground. I just moved along. I started thinking that day, I'm glad I don't stick to my bad habits anymore. And the interesting thing about change is you have to make it happen. You can't just hope. I mean, you can hope for it, but in so many ways, it's like change you have to work for. In life, change is based on actions and hopes and wishes that turn into reactions and actions from parts of the world. It tends to revolve, for the grander scale, tends to revolve around the political bureau, or maybe business enterprise work. I'm getting close to a bench, so I'm just going to sit down. I haven't been taking as many walks, I'll have some things to say, but I don't really know what. Maybe I'm just drained from doing so many vlogs, but it's sad how I have kept so many of them to myself. Maybe I'm just drained because I want to record something optimistic every time I hit the record button. I end up just going into my depressive pessimism, or just my depressive yet neutral ways, because, well, there's a point in how I'm not doing that well in those moments, I notice there's rain here, so I'll just stand here. There's water on the bench right there. Nice little bench, nice bench. There's water on it, so. All I wish to say is, I shouldn't care anymore about the crisis that I have experienced, that I feel in some ways I have imagined. Because why care about it? Maybe because, well, sometimes I would have felt like it grew so extravagant. Sometimes I'd feel the repercussions on my body. Then someone else did feel the same thing to the same degree. And instead of pessimistically droning on, they would move on. And they would even work, or they would provide for themselves in some way. Instead, it's like I just don't do anything, so why is it that it's so hard to live? Well, maybe it shouldn't be hard to live. But I'll admit it, it's tempting every time because, well, there's a point in how it grabs onto you and it doesn't let go. This series of happenings and obfuscating events and the delusional tendencies, they grab onto me and they don't let go. And the point is that I can get very sad. I can get very sad over it, and I can be very dramatic over it. Okay. But it's not that bad. As long as I manage it, which I have been managing it, and as long as I live regardless, and I learn to adapt, and it's not that bad. But the point is that I've been having some serene dreams, such as I've been having some nightmares about life, nightmares about life and about the world being very crooked and kind of disastrous in some ways. And you notice what's happening in this world. You notice what's happening in this world. You notice how there are people that are committed injustices upon every day. You notice there are places out there in the Wild West where some people are, that's happened. People have thrown acid at for no reason other than you're randomly chosen or I fucking hate you or something, So people are just thrown acid at and they got absolutely devastated over that. So, I guess what I'll really say is there's a lot of injustice in the world. There's a lot of injustice. There's a lot of hostile moments, and there's even some sort of hostile takeover that's always happening somewhere. War never ends. It feels that way 100% of the way. And in fact, I don't know how many times you could pinpoint in history where there were no wars. When society began. But even then, probably there were even more. I don't know. As soon as people learned, let's pick up weapons, let's create weapons, and then to use them, the world got worse. It really did get worse. And since then, it's just a recuperation after another. I was reading up on, a while ago, I was reading up on Barack Obama's Wikipedia, okay, or something like that. It was information about his presidency. I learned that he wanted to denuclearize the United States as long as other countries played ball, so that hopefully someday there wouldn't be nukes anymore, which I thought was so sweet. And it started making me think about what it really means to evangelically act in some sort of political situation, the courage it requires, the courage it takes. So many people are quick to point at politicians and say, haha, you're fucking crazy and you are fake and you are a liar for what you are doing. They're quick to point at politicians and to proclaim them to be fakers and hypocrites. The reality is, it's probably a tougher job than a lot of people are willing to admit themselves, and I think that deserves some credence and respect in of itself. But it's more than that. It's that then they will do and they will actually do good things, So that was huge. That was really huge. And I used to, for a while I kind of had some kind of problem with dark, but then I started thinking more in that way. I started realizing that I can be insensitive myself, you know, can say really bad things myself. I'm just not in a position where I could have done horrible things, but I'm glad because really the last 28 years, they've been maturity 101 for me. Okay, they've really been about me maturing and me growing up past this whole prospect of not being grown and not being mature, not being wise, not being even reasoned. And I think he was at least a pretty cool president. He just had some problems. But that's what I was talking about. Also, we lay a lot of it on the head figure, you know. For example, Donald popularized this in a bad way. He talks about how Donald would talk about how he would lower grocery prices, he would do this, he would do that, practically talking about performing great miracles for the country, which is a great thing on paper. I mean, it's certainly encouraging and prosperful through his words. But the point is that there's so many factors to that. If you want a free market, you're discrediting a lot of those arguments already. If you want to say, if you're beyond discrediting a few arguments beyond that. And that's the thing, is that the world is not individual. The world is summarized by its hive, its group mind, its tendency to rely on others. A person will not just do it all themselves, they rely on others. It's why when a singular person ends up being a dictator or being some sort of renowned world leader that then takes the charge so significantly, it's why it can often end up being a bad thing, because it would have been good to be able to reflect more and to rely on more others and to have more of a consensus instead of an individual declaration, a consensus. And that's why socialism, I think, tends to have great ideals. And the reason that is because socialism, it revolves around people relying on others and people leveling out with others. You know how they'd say, okay, so everyone should have a say. Under socialism, say everyone should have a say, not just the big boy table, you know? Everyone should have a say, and that is one of the points of socialism, is that everyone should have a say in the work environment upon what is going on. If you're allocating the work environment in the first place, it must be because you had credits all along. And if other people are going to see your viewpoint and to understand your reasoning, it is that much more likely that you have a valid reasoning in the first place, because that way there's less warping. It all evens out quite nicely, because while you can argue that some of the societal construct is crazy, society in of itself should technically be sane, because society is what allocates law enforcement, society is what allocates products, and just really everything that we have created has been through the allocations brought forward by society, which translated into individuals that we chose or that were chosen for the position that they're in, or that chose themselves even. So I guess the point I'm making is, we live in a world with complications. We live in a world with differences, but commonalities tend to be sound. While commonalities tend to be sound, unique differences, can be a beautiful thing. You take it back 30 or so years, and the home computer is very much being questioned, which makes zero sense. The home computer is very much being questioned because not because of its practicality, because it is unusual. In that sense, in particular, you can argue it is best to have an individual or a small group carry the charge forward, who know better. And say that anyone knows better than others, well, maybe it's just a fact of life that some will know better than others with certain things. A lot of people out there know tons, incredibly beyond more than I do at some things, for nearly everything. So, now I just have a head on my shoulders. I feel like I have a head on my shoulders. I have some sort of reason, perspective, but it doesn't even apply all of the time, you know? I've just wanted to record this to prove that I'm still alive. And I'm sorry that it's been a long time, and I know it's been a long time, and I know I've been very impulsive my whole life. But lately it's dawning on me how that is for me. And I am sorry about it. I'm trying to get better with that. Society, really in many ways it inspires me, and I want to make that clear because I do believe that society, it inspires me because we have paved roads. I mentioned this in the blog post of mine. We have paved roads because I can walk to Sobeys and with my disability payments buy myself food and something to drink, which has been cultivated legally and ethically, and there are even recalls if a food item is considered to be dangerous for you in any way or poorly produced. There are recalls. Businesses can get sued. I mean, really, it's a matter of. I'm just appreciating that the world is organized enough for these things to happen, instead of everyone literally fending off for themselves, which in some instances in life it can be like that. People are fending off for themselves, okay? But there is at least an organized metric so that if you can gather yourself some income, then things are very easy to accomplish. In fact, perhaps a bit too easy. As long as you have the income for something, it's a bit too easy to then buy what you want, I think. Over here in Canada, it's certainly clear. Some places in the world, it's probably less clear. That was a very big shame. I know there's something about Russia and how at least once upon a time they had big problems with stock and carrying enough products for themselves and enough food, essentials, which was very terrible. It's a terrible thing that they couldn't manage that. So I've done a little bit of reading on it, and that's one thing I found out. I guess what I'm trying to say as well is that the world is not so black and white. There are shades to everything, literally everything and everyone. And it's best to just not generalize and to consider different perspectives. Who is unanimously evil? Well, I said something in one of my past YouTube videos about this. I'll just say this. I think that a serial killer is inadvertently ruin lives, okay, on the basis of what they have done. I mentioned in a previous video how, because I am manipulated and corrupted in some ways by the friction inside of me and around me. I've mentioned in a YouTube video how serial killers could still have, everyone has some kind of heart. Yeah, that's what I said. Even serial killers, that's what I said. Everyone has some kind of heart, but everyone has a dark side. That's what I said. And I think that, well, what they did is a despicable thing. Maybe there is a point in their lives where they held a moral standard, or maybe there's a point in their lives where they held some sort of moral set of beliefs. So, are serial killers unanimously monsters? They all did something so monstrous and kept on doing it and doing it and doing it. But I guess all I can say is rest in peace to those that have their lives be lost. Because it is a terrible thing, it is a monstrous thing, to just be living out there, you're just minding your own business, and then someone wants to kill you and someone kills you. I felt like, as someone who's dealt with psychosis, I felt like I could die at any time. Okay? I just don't feel it, but in a certain way I felt it. Deep down in my mind, I felt it like I could die at any time. I've imagined that there are conspiracies against me. I've imagined that there are problems that people have with me. I've imagined it correlates to my experiences. I think to keep my sanity, I've tried to avoid it. And the thing is people would say politicians are mass murderers. Politicians can be mass murderers. Those that bomb are mass murderers. And I think that it's more complicated than murdering yourself, evidently. That it does bring about an interesting point, an inquisitive matter to consider, which is if the bombing is not necessary, and regardless, bombings are logical, but if the drone strike or whatever is not necessary, then what if they simply are murderers that deserve to be arrested and thrown in jail? Because you can easily say they are. That's the thing, is that they're powerful. And that creates a difference. They're powerful, and the justification puts it above the edge. But then you have to wonder, would someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who hung himself in his jail cell or something like that, I'm not proving it is, but it seems he certainly died. It seems like he certainly died. Is anyone even saved? Is anyone saved from the valiant justice that other people want to exert over the world? It depends on how consumerate and safe your methodology of harm is as an individual. That's what really, like, if it's methodically done, and if it is done for some sort of justified reasoning, then your murder or your crime or your economic blasphemy will be a lot more forgiven than if you are just living your life, and if you are murdering, but perhaps in a sense, even if you are just living your life, because these people, they reap great rewards based on these powerful motives and inclinations and actions. They reap great rewards. They reap massive rewards. I mean, okay, so a business head, a CEO, gets some flack for firing a lot of his workers, which makes him want to cry, and then he wipes his tears with his dollar bills that he gained because he fired some of his workers. It's really how the world is. We justify certain things, but other things are just so not justifiable that we interpret differently, and then we condemn, and we insult, and we hope, and we want certain things. So the world is complicated, okay? I'm trying to say that in an ideal situation, everyone would be healed, and we wouldn't have to worry about such things. The truth is I should believe in the healing, really. I should believe in it, I know. But I've started to think that we're always going to be flawed as a society and as people. We're always going to be flawed to various degrees. I've really started to think it because I have had very morbid thoughts. So I started thinking that no one is truly freed from the vicious grasp, you know? But that some can fare and handle it and even thrive through it much better than others. I'm just going to walk back home now. It's 10:53. I want to get back by the time I'm eating. Should be before that by a fair amount. Anyways, thank you for everything, and I love you. Goodbye.